So now I want to talk about inverse relations. And first of all, this word relation, a relation is anything that you can graph, any equation that you can graph, okay? So when I say relations, we're talking less specific than functions, just any old relation, any old thing that can be graphed, okay? And an inverse relation, let me give you a couple of facts. The most important two facts are going to be that when we talk about inverses, what we mean is that we switch x's and y's both on the graph and in the equation itself. If you need to find the inverse for an equation, you switch every x becomes a y, every y becomes an x, and you solve it again for y. So that's inverses, and that's what they mean. And then visually, inverse relations are reflections of each other over the line y equals x, which looks like that. Okay? So if you want to visually recognize a set of inverse relations, what you're looking for is, are they reflections over each other along the y equals x? And part of the consequence of being reflections of each other is that they will actually intersect along that line. So let me give you a pretty simple, straightforward example of this. Let's say that we have the equation y equals x squared. This is a parent function for quadratics, and it looks approximately like that. Okay? Now, if I wanted to find the inverse relation to that, I would say then for the inverse, we would switch x and y, so we would say x equals y squared instead. And then we would resolve it for y. So if I've got y squared equals x, to solve it for y, I would take the square root so that I cancel the square. And then on the other side, it turns out that you have to take plus or minus the square root, because if you don't, then you're not accounting for the fact that if you square a positive or a negative, you get a positive either way, and you can't really tell which one you started with, so you have to account for the idea that you may have started with either case, okay? So then we get that y equals plus or minus the square root of x, and that is the inverse. Now, how would I know how to graph that? Well, let me draw that first function again, y equals x squared, and then let me put in, here's that line, y equals x, and I know I've got to reflect over it So imagine that we still start in the middle there, but we want to cross anywhere where we can along that line and become a reflection. And so that's what reflections look like. If you can draw that y equals x line between the two of them, then you will see that you have got a reflection over that y equals x line, as long as you have inverse relations. Okay? So you need to look closely for that or draw it in for you to be able to understand that. And that then is hopefully some help on how to recognize and deal with inverse relations.